was trying to document what's happening there.
Okay.
Federal agents have been repeatedly firing projectiles at them.
Hello,
Yesterday,
everybody.
they fired into a moving car,
Hello, sir.
which was being driven
All
by
right.
one of our
You can hear
reporters.
me. Good.
Howdy.
Welcome. Welcome to the Journalism's Roundtable. My name is Richard Prince, and I write an online column called Journal-isms. That's journal-isms.com on diversity issues in the news business. This roundtable is an extension of that. We started the roundtable in 1999 when a friend of ours was leaving to pursue a doctorate. She said, keep these going, and we have. We met every month in various restaurants in Washington, D.C. until the COVID pandemic when we switched to Zoom. Our participation multiplied, and we hope to have more roundtables that are hybrid, meeting in person, as well as having people attend via Zoom, like this. We're at the Medill, Washington, D.C. campus of Northwestern University. We think of this as an online dinner party with the purpose to network and to learn. Some of the networking takes place in the chat room, so those who are on Zoom, please feel free to make use of it to message everyone or just an individual that you'd like to make contact with. And a special welcome to those on Facebook. Please leave messages in the comments section if you want to reach us. As I said, we're very pleased to be here at the Medill DC campus, and we're doubly pleased to have with us the Dean of Medill, Charles Whitaker. So I'm going to turn this over to him. Do you need the mic?
Thank you, Richard, and it's quite an honor, privilege, pleasure to have the roundtable here at Medill. It's always wonderful when you grace us with your presence, and it's great for us. We have 3 students here who are covering Washington, D.C. as part of our Medill on the Hill program. I think it's a wonderful experience for them to be a part of this as well. So welcome to everyone, both here and online. Thank you, Richard.
All right, thank you. Okay. Well, people are still coming in. Good. Okay. And Ivan Myers, we can't forget Ivan, who is our on-site host here at the Medill DC campus. Thank you, Ivan, for everything you've done for us.
We're happy to have you. Thank you for being here.
Very good. Okay. Yay. Okay. Now, I wonder whether, I see Andale is here. We want to start off on a very upbeat note, to congratulate and have a toast to those of you who have something to toast with. Andale Gross, who is now the executive editor of the Kansas City Star, formerly the managing editor, and before that at the AP as head of the race and ethnicity team. And we want to first of all toast Andale, and then hear what he has planned, because we all have high hopes for you, Andale. All right, so a toast to Andale Gross. Much success at the Kansas City Star. Hear, hear.
You're here.
Okay, Andale, say a few words for us, if you would.
Hey, thanks for the toast. I'm sorry I had nothing to raise. I'm still in the office in the newsroom. No, I appreciate the support. It's a huge honor, to be at the helm of this newsroom. The Kansas City Star is actually the first place I worked out of college, out of University of Missouri, Columbia, when I first got started in journalism in 1994. And so it's really a full circle. It was really a full circle moment to me when I got hired to be ME in the summer of 2023, and then to be elevated to EE earlier this month was really like a tremendous milestone for me. It's not lost on me that I'm the first Black EE in the history of the Star. I was the first Black ME as well. And while that's something I don't take lightly, and I appreciate that, being one of those historical markers that I always thought happened to other people, not myself, I really just wanted to focus on what got me here, which is the work and dedication in this newsroom. We have a great, talented, actually diverse, it's gotten more diverse since I've been here. Staff here covering Kansas City region. We have a good mixture of veterans, folks who've been here 30 years, or as well as people who are new to journalism. So really good range of journalists here in the room. And as far as my vision is just really to, one thing we've been working a lot on here at the Star, which I hope other newsrooms have been doing as well, is really working hard to repair in some cases, but also develop relationships between our Black community and other historically marginalized communities here in Kansas City. If you recall, Kansas City Star, before I got here, did a Truth in Black and White series in which it also included an apology at the time from the executive editor at the time, apology to the community for how they misrepresented and underrepresented and covered the Black community. So really, we are trying to uphold that mission, to continue to try to strive every day to be a Kansas City Star that people across the community can look at and recognize themselves in. And that's just something that we'll continue to work on every day. But at the heart of it is just really trying to do really strong journalism that people can't get anywhere but the Kansas City Star as it pertains to our region, and to tell those stories in the most, thoughtful and a creative way, day in and day out, and truly try to represent the community as a whole. So that's our charge. That's something I want to continue to uphold. That's my vision, and hopefully we'll see where it takes us. So,
All right. Well, thank you very much. Once again, thank you very much, Andale, and much success to you. All right. We want to go on to remember someone who has passed. And is Maureen Bunyan here? She's going to lead this next segment here. Maureen, do we see you?
Maureen is a founder of the National Association of Black Journalists.
She certainly is. And she's a longtime broadcaster here in Washington, D.C. Maybe she hasn't arrived yet. Well, we'll come back to Maureen. And then I see, is Yannick Rice Lamb with us yet? Let's see, Yannick. Okay. Well, Yannick has got a number of people who are going to help us remember. We're going to help us remember one of our roundtable colleagues, Ron Harris, who was in that sailing accident about a month ago, and we wanted to remember him. And she has a number of colleagues of his who want to help us remember what Ron meant to us and to others. So any of those who are here for that purpose, feel free to weigh in right now. I see a number of folks. Don't all talk at once now. Come on.
Well, I can start. Ron and I. Does everybody hear me?
Yeah. First,
Yes.
Identify yourself, John.
Okay. Ron and I go back to the early 1980s. We friends, colleagues at the LA Times. I think back in the early 80s, we were part of a team of African American journalists who had won an NABJ award for coverage of Black community in Los Angeles. We also shared in the Pulitzer for the coverage of the unrest after the Rodney King verdicts. He's a friend, a colleague, a wonderful journalist, a special person. I live here in Mexico, and the last time we spoke, he talked about coming here to visit me in Cuernavaca. We were longtime friends. We not only participated in stories together, but we also participated in mentoring and encouraging young folks to get into the business. Ron is a special person, and he's going to be missed.
Here. Okay. His son is with us also, Tracy Harris. Some of us had the pleasure of seeing Tracy at Howard University two Fridays ago when we had a similar remembrance. Tracy, where are you?
I'm right here.
All right.
How you doing, Mr. Prince?
The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you it's a pleasure meeting you at Howard University. And I have some people to thank on here before we even get started. Number one, I have to thank Yannick. I'm not sure if she's online yet. She was absolutely phenomenal when it came to giving me assistance, making sure that my dad was honored in a respected manner, and getting the word out to people that were in his community that I didn't even know about. I learned a lot about my dad more And I told my brother the same thing. I said, man, we're going to learn more about Dad in his passing than we ever knew about him when we were together. And that has proven to be true. And I also want to thank you, Mr. Prince, for what you did and the effects that it had. I'm not sure if you really know the details behind it. When you and Lamar spoke, or whomever you spoke to regarding what's happening with my dad, you sent that article out on Journal-isms to the group or to your audience. So I took that information. The Coast Guard got that information through you, or I think Lamar Presley as well may have sent that information to them, and they did such a better job after they knew that they had eyes on them. And
In finding him.
you did a excellent job by doing that. The effects of that helped me get a lot more information about my dad, helped my family out, helped us understand what the situation was, and made it was a traumatic situation, a bad situation overall. But not knowing is worse than anything. And I think the fact that we were able to get and understand some information by you doing simply by putting that out to your people and your followers, they jumped on it because that meant pressure. And I wanted to tell you, first of all, thank you for that. We just had the last celebration. We had the celebration in DC on the 19th at Howard University at the Oliver. When I met you, Mr. Prince, and then we just had one on Saturday in our hometown of Memphis, where we honored my family with my family, friends, and other colleagues that he had from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the Los Angeles Times, Ebony Magazine, all the other places that my dad worked. So I would just want to chime in and tell you guys thank you. I know my dad, I went to a couple of Black journalist conventions with him, one in Los Angeles, and this was back in the 90s. And then we went to another one, I want to say it was in DC or Philly. But we went there, and I was his little tag along. I was also his first mate. But I know that he loved the community, and he really thrived in this community. It was very special to him. And the people that have worked with my father, and if you know him, just know that he was very passionate about it. He's very passionate about a lot of things. And I'm just honored to be, number one, his kid, number one, to have the chance to beat him in all areas, because I'm very competitive. But my father was a great example, a good man, and taught me a lot of things. And I plan to honor him every chance I get. So thank you guys very much for letting me have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Tracy. This is wonderful. It's good to hear.
Richard?
Journalism can, what? Yeah. I'm not being heard? What? Oh, yeah.
Richard?
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to turn the floor over to Yannick Rice-Lamb.
I just want to tell John Mitchell that the only reason Ron never came to see you is you're landlocked in Cuernavaca. If you were someplace with a port, he just might have made it to see you.
It's great to see you, Fred.
Oh, John, so good to see you. What great times we had with Ron at the LA Times. Anyway, go ahead, Yannick. Say whatever you were about to say.
Well, I want Yannick to just say a little more about who Ron was for those who don't know.
We can't hear a thing.
I didn't say a thing yet.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Yannick Rice-Lamb. I'm a professor of journalism at Howard University and a friend and colleague of Ron's. I also like to call, he's like a big brother, kind of an adoring, sometimes annoying, but always protective big brother. So, and I also like to say that Ron lived his life. Ron's life was like a jazzy blues song, and he played every note to the fullest, and he also danced on the edge, which also drove some people crazy. But he contributed a lot at Howard University. Professor Jennifer Thomas and I have the pleasure and honor of directing the Howard University News Service, which he founded with Philip Dixon. And we're one of the few schools that has a news service, so it's really wonderful to have that. And it serves primarily the Black press, but it goes to anyone who wants to use our copy. So the Washington Post is done at the Chronicle of Higher Education, different broadcast stations. And it's really raised the bar for a lot of our students because he tells them it's like Associated Press and they have to get their stories and meet the deadlines. And sometimes people approach us directly for stories that they want done out of Washington because they can't be here and they're in other parts of the country. And the students really get a kick out of seeing their bylines. all over the country and sometimes outside of the country in multiple newspapers and websites. So we're really happy about, his role in doing that. And also just pushing the students. Some felt they were pushed a little too hard. And a colleague called him recently a journalism giant, but I also said that some students saw him as a giant pain in the neck at times. But
how do you
but
think we felt, Yannick?
I guess he practiced on all of you and just inflicted it everywhere else. So, but a number of them
Well
also said that he helped to make them the journalists that they are today. And he helped a lot of them personally and professionally in different things that they've done. So we've we witnessed a lot of stories then, but heard a lot more since then. And even in retirement, he continued to help edit some of the stories for the news service. He would go in his pocket to pay for students to travel outside of Washington to cover stories. And also his phone was like an appendage. So he'd call them, like a lot of editors and producers do, "Where's my story?" And so some of them had to adjust to that because we'd call them, but he'd call them way more than we did because he liked being on the phone too. But, he traveled with them to the RNC and DNC. He led our election coverage. Most of the time we called him the election czar or Captain Ron. But he likes to be bossy, he likes to run things. So, but he always did a great job doing that, and he pushed us as well. So it was a pleasure working with him, pleasure being his friend too.
Thank you,
Anybody
Yannick.
else?
Hello?
Oh,
Oops, sorry.
was somebody about to speak? Who was that? Somebody said hello. Okay.
I
All right.
can
Anyone?
speak.
Yes, please do.
Good afternoon, evening, everyone. I was at the event a few days ago with
You have to
Professor.
identify yourself first.
I'm so sorry. I'm Dr. Frederick Kendrick, formerly a colleague of Ron's at Howard University. And when Professor Lamb spoke about the election project, that was one of the last things that I worked on with him before I left Howard and before he left. And it's everything that has been said about him is true. And it's interesting because everyone has their perspective and their vantage point. And so it has a little tint from each person, but everything that's been said is true. Ron could cuss you out and in the same sentence turn around and commend you about how good your article or your story was. As a professor who worked alongside of him, he was dogged. I mean, when we were at the working the Republican National Convention in 2016, it was just masterful to see him out there pushing the students up with the microphone in their hand, trying to get stories, trying to get articles out of them. And then the night of the election, same thing. He was one of a kind, and I know that word is thrown around a lot, but after he retired the first time from Howard, they tried to give me the election project and everything, and I did the best I could to try to fill his shoes, but I don't know how you fill Ron's shoes, and again, everyone has a story on him, but he will be missed. And I can say last week, Phil Dixon spoke about him and said that he was a man's man and he was a real man. And I told Phil that was the impression I got when I first met him. There's this guy in this full suit that's walking around with this leather bag and his cell phone, ordering people around and telling people what to do. And I'm like, who is that guy? And they said, that's Ron Harris. And it was just interesting to see him in action. And as someone who worked beside him for 2 elections and 2 national conventions from the different Republicans and Democrats, the words cannot explain what he brought to the classroom and what he brought to me as a colleague. And he'll be missed, but I'm happy that I knew him. And as I told Professor Lamb when I found out, I'm happy that he went doing what he loved, which was being on his boat, and I think a lot of people echo those statements too. So for those who in the room who may not know him, ask around, and there won't be another Ron. I can assure you of that. And I'm honored to have been able to work with him. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we have time for one more. Okay, Jim Incendio. Oh, let me give you that.
you want me to go ahead? Well, okay. I just wanted to talk about Ron the Sailor and also the Taskmaster. A few years ago, my wife and I bought a house in St. Croix, on the island of St. Croix, and I spoke with Ron, and he found out my interest in sailing, and we were going to sail down to St. Croix, and he said, "Brother, you don't play around with the ocean, with Mother Nature, so I'm going to give you a couple of books, and I need you to read these books and know these books." And he tested me on the knowledge, the sailing knowledge in those books. We never got to take that trip, but I'm a better sailor today because of him.
Okay, thank you all. I think it's time to move on to the next segment, and that will be about our main attraction here, which is a what's that? Oh, the video, yeah. Okay. One last remembrance here. There he is. There he is at our round table.
Thanks, Jackie.
Yes, thank you very much. All right. Okay, moving right along. Right before, or just today, but between the time I sent out the last email about what was happening, some events took place in Chicago revolving our topic, ICE and the press, with one reporter being arrested briefly, another one being assaulted by missiles from the authorities, and she was just quietly sitting in her car and had nothing to do with any protests or other activity involving ICE. So we asked, thanks to our colleagues at Medill, particularly Ivan, if anyone from Chicago could join us to explain a little bit more about what's happening with ICE and the press in this particular instance. And we have Craig Duff with us, who, as people, there he is, who can explain his own involvement with this issue. So I'm going to turn it right over now to Craig. Craig, what happened and how were you involved?
Thanks, Richard. It's my pleasure to be here with you all. Quite an honor. Thank you. So I've been working on a project, sort of a creative project, and following some clergy who have been going out there for a number of years to Broadview. Broadview is a suburb just west of the city limits, so it actually is outside of the sanctuary laws of Chicago. So ICE has been operating this transfer facility there for a number of years. It has been used basically to sort of transfer people that they arrest and bring, and then they take them elsewhere to an airport, oftentimes to take them outside of the city. places like Rockford and Gary, some of the airports nearby. There have been a number of clergy that have been going there on Friday mornings to pray at 7 in the morning because it's primarily been used on Fridays. Since 2006, there have been clergy going out there. And for many years, the clergy were actually able to go inside and also onto the buses before they were transported out. That's, of course, has all changed over the last several months. And things have escalated. So I was there a couple of weeks ago when the clergy were there, but a number of protesters have come. They're trying to basically stop the ICE vehicles or try to slow down as much as they can and to hamper the operations there as much as they can by getting in the way of the vehicles and things like that and trying to stop that sort of stuff. So the protest really is about trying to confront ICE a bit and to gum up the works, I guess. And just a couple of weeks ago, it was fairly small. There were a number of people there, but they were going up to cars, trying to stand in front of the cars, and then they were pushed back. Quite a contrast when I was there on the 12th of September to being there on Friday when things have really escalated. A week ago, the protests had gotten more confrontational. There were more people there. ICE became more aggressive in its pushing back. They had snipers on not snipers, but people on the roof with tear gas canisters and pellets and those sorts of things. And so there were a couple of local folks who were running for Congress were out there. The mayor of Evanston was out there a week ago, Friday, and they actually used the tear gas and the pepper spray on the people. Then they put up a fence to make it harder to get close to the facility. It actually cuts off a street in Broadview. The mayor has complained that it will block access to the fire department for the companies that actually have their facilities there near this building. And the crowd was quite a bit bigger on Friday. And they now had to go down a street. There's Harvard Street, which has to go back toward the facility to the fence. And so they would go down and push down for a bit, and then they would get pushed back by ICE, and they would try to stop vehicles getting in there. But it escalated quite a bit, and there was quite a bit of tear gas, quite a bit of pellets, and then rubber bullets as well, which did some damage. And even broke one protester's guitar, and broke some windows and things like that. I was there mostly just to observe. I didn't get very close. I was sort of hanging out in the back. I don't have the right protective gear. One of our former students who is also on the adjunct faculty, Colin Boyle, was there. Got some amazing pictures up in the front. He had a gas mask and all that stuff, and was able to get some amazing photographs of what went on. It concerns me a little bit that the escalation is only going to keep getting worse. Just this afternoon, the administration asked for 100 Illinois National Guard to protect the ICE facilities. So that will certainly escalate things. And just yesterday, ICE was on the streets in Chicago on Michigan Avenue and picking up people in places like Millennium Park. So that's kind of the situation there. This facility is there as a transfer station. It's not really designed to have people in there for very long, but the protesters and others believe that they're holding people there for quite a while, and changing the use of the facility. They've now boarded up all the windows, so there's no way to see out anymore or to hear anything from inside the building. So
Did you get any? Excuse me. Come to any conclusions about how the interactions between ICE and the press?
So there's quite a bit of press out there. There are live trucks. The local TV stations are there. There's a number of photographers. There's also independent media there, some local bloggers and things like that. And so it's a mix of that. And on Saturday they promised this, and pardon the expression, but ICE promised a shit show on Saturday night, and things did escalate quite a bit. They were pretty aggressive, and they created a lot of tear gas, and then pushed the press themselves to have to walk through the tear gas and push them away from where they were staged on Saturday night. It's generally the press have been sort of hanging out further out and then going in. Some of them are going forward. But the TV folks mostly are sort of set back a little bit and sending a photographer and then coming back out and doing most of their interviews further away from the sort of the main action down there.
Okay, thanks. All right, that's disconcerting, particularly when you hear about journalists being arrested in that kind of situation.
Yeah, and then of course the CBS reporter had just showed up in a truck. She had her window open and was just checking the situation out, and then they fired the bullet pellets into the vehicle itself. And, she got quite a lungful.
Okay. Anybody got any questions before we move to the next speaker on this? Oh yeah. Hold on. We got.
Yeah, if you don't mind saying.
Or I can repeat it. Okay.
Please repeat it.
Yeah, Jesse Lewis wants to know were there any penalties for the ICE people who misbehaved?
I'm not right now.
Or by their commanding officers or sergeants.
I don't know. I haven't read anything about that, but certainly they are most likely following the orders of somebody to do what they're doing and behaving the way they are. It's not one individual. It's groups of individuals doing this. It's an organized sort of pattern that they're doing to push back.
Hey, Craig.
Richard, I have a
Fred
question.
Sweets from St. Louis here. Was that a clearly marked news media vehicle that they fired pellets into? Was it an intentional? Was it marked CBS News? You mentioned.
I don't believe it was. She said it was her own vehicle, but But it may have been her car that she uses for work, because she was just going there to check things out. There was nobody else around at that time. She just pulled up to the facility there, and then they targeted her. So, but that's a good question. I don't think there was, but maybe.
Okay. Miranda Spivak has her hand raised as well.
I'm wondering if anybody has looked at, I've just been Googling while you're talking, what ICE's procedures are for dealing with the media, and if they are in some way a regulation or they're aspirational, and what the managers of these news operations are doing in response to this. So it's sort of a two-part question.
Yeah, actually, I'm not privy to that. I'm not engaged with that sort of thing. I just happen to be out there working on this project myself. But there was no engagement from ICE with the media. There's no representative there, talking to the media at all at the scene. So I don't know,
Well, one of our subsequent speakers, I'm sure I can speak to that. I want to move on to our next, and thank you so much, Craig, for that.
My pleasure. I have to go to another meeting, but it's been a pleasure to be with you.
Especially on such short notice. We really appreciate that.
My pleasure. Take care.
Okay. I want to ask Giovanni Diaz to come next. He's been working on the case that's probably gotten the most publicity and coverage involving ICE and the press. He is one of the attorneys for the reporter Mario Guevara, Salvadorian reporter who operates out of the Atlanta area, who is very popular, got a large following, but he's been imprisoned for more than 50 days, the only journalist in the United States to have been held in ICE custody after being arrested in relation to his work. So I want to ask Mr. Diaz to just spend the 3 minutes telling us what he can about how the relationship of ICE and the press has worked out in your situation. And
and can you all hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So again, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to participate in this roundtable. So Mario's situation is unique in that when Mario was arrested while covering a protest in Georgia on June 14th, because he's lawfully allowed to be here in the U.S., and the government wasn't actively trying to remove him, but because he's still not a legal permanent resident, ICE put a hold on him when he was arrested. So his situation was I think, terrifying to a lot of folks that we've spoken to here in Georgia that are involved with the media, because he had a big press badge, he had his helmet on. It was a vest with that said press in bold, and it was huge. And he was also wearing his credentials on his neck, and he was live streaming, which is something that he does every single day. So they arrested him for maybe not complying, or in their view at the time, he wasn't complying with some of the things that they were asking him to do. But those charges were subsequently dropped. And I think where it started to get really disturbing was after being arrested, another jurisdiction in the metro Atlanta area, Gwinnett County, suddenly swore out warrants for his arrest for alleged conduct while covering some police and ICE activity in the past. And they swore out warrants on him. And that, most of us had never seen anything like that. There were traffic violations, essentially, the warrants were sworn out. So, although we haven't been able to confirm that there was, a coordinated effort between ICE and Gwinnett County to, conspired against him, there's enough information that they were at least working together from the moment he was arrested to share information. So he was arrested, and we immediately did what we usually do. We filed for a bond motion. We filed a bond motion, got a hearing fairly quickly, and the immigration judge agreed with us and gave us a bond. But the government attorney's conduct from that hearing sounded some alarms. They immediately started questioning my client about things that weren't even in the record, about things that weren't even included in what we submitted, what wasn't even included in what the government submitted. They really didn't submit very much at the hearing. They started asking him about some of the stuff he was live streaming about in the past that we felt was relevant to whether or not he's a danger. Well, the judge sided with us, but we kind of felt at that moment, and the bond was granted. He was granted bond. So I think a lot of people don't know, if they haven't been following the case closely, is that he was granted bond by an immigration judge, and that's based on the conduct of the government attorney and some of the weird questions they were asking, and then their subsequent actions. The moment we got him bond, the court or the ICE attorneys filed for a discretionary stay, claiming, with the Board of Immigration Appeals, and they appealed his bond. The Board of Immigration Appeals granted that stay. So this bond order that we had was stayed, and it was frozen, and he wasn't allowed to pay the bond. And even before that was confirmed, ICE used some obstructionist type, tactics that they've used before with other cases that we've had in the past. So we kind of recognized them. But this family wasn't allowed to post a bond. Then they got the stay from the Board of Immigration Appeals, and he wasn't allowed to be released. So of course we filed our responses and our oppositions. Kind of in the background of all this was an old case that Mario had that was closed back in 2012. Mario came to the United States in 2004, applied for asylum in 2007. His asylum case was referred to court. He fought his asylum case in court. It was denied. He appealed it, but in negotiations with the government and his attorney, they administratively closed his case to allow him to stay here in the United States legally. And that case had been closed since 2012. So in the background of this, I started trying to reopen this. So we, obviously we didn't oppose the reopening of his case because he was eligible for a green card. So we responded by saying, hey, you could reopen the case, but bring it back to immigration court. That was pending for a long time. We thought it was weird that it was pending. So we got a team together from the ACLU to sue ICE to release him. And during that, they denied everything and tried to order him. And that happened about last week. So we quickly moved and mobilized, filed some emergency motions in district court. A colleague of mine also filed an emergency stay in the 11th Circuit, and that's where we are. So that's a brief summary that I can give you in a 3-minute time period. And I think I've got maybe a minute or 30 seconds left. And kind of the whole disturbing thing about this is we started seeing some things, some decisions that were coming down from the Board of Immigration Appeals since January. None of them favorable for the applicant, for the immigrant, maybe one or two. And the decisions seem to be cherry picking the law. It seemed like the courts were compromised, at least politically compromised, and that was just kind of, a belief. But I think watching this case transpire, it's pretty clear that the Board of Immigration Appeals, the entire immigration court system is politically compromised, which we were kind of afraid of because the immigration court is different than a lot of other courts in that it falls under the Department of Justice. So all these judges serve the executive, and they serve the secretary, the attorney general. So, they've basically been able to weaponize the immigration court to really do what they want, and try to get as many orders of removal as they can. And they've clearly and openly have tried to do everything they can to keep Mario detained and to remove him from the United States. So the only assurances we have right now are that he's not going to be removed based on conversations that my partner and U.S. attorney have had. They're not going to remove him. They're not looking at removing him until October 2nd. What we're hoping is we're going to get a decision on the emergency stay from the 11th Circuit before that date. I'm not allowed to talk too much detail about the habeas case because this specific district court has some interesting rules about talking about cases before decisions. But that's kind of what.
Okay, thank you. I should also mention that Mario gave an interview from prison, talking about what it was like there, and I encourage everybody to read it. What can you summarize what he was saying, and also, what does this whole case tell you about the relationship of ICE and the press?
I'm not an expert on journalism or the press. I'm sitting.
Well, I mean,
I'm
just
speaking
in
to a
this
whole
case,
room.
at least anyway, yeah. Just in this case.
I mean, they clearly, I think they have the immigration court and the immigration system, because it falls under the executive. It's an interesting tool in that in Mario's case, they had that ability to at least detain him and then to try to pull out all the stops to keep him detained. So speaking specifically to journalists that are in Mario's position that have precarious immigration status or they're not yet legal permanent residents, the chilling effect, right? I mean, those folks, obviously are going to have to think twice about how they conduct themselves. And I know that here in Georgia, he was unique in the way that he reports, in that because of kind of the loyalty from his followings and how controversial he was with a lot of his views as well, everybody paid attention to what he was doing. And he was able to get information so quickly that every time there was some kind of operation with an unmarked vehicle or suspicious looking individuals who looked like they were doing undercover activity, he would hear about it and he would show up immediately. So it's kind of disturbing that they've gone to these lengths to silence him and to get him out of the way so that he's not reporting these ICE activities and that he's not, at least in their view, getting in the way of these activities, these law enforcement activities. And I think that's disturbing, seems to be disturbing, and it is to anybody who covers this type of stuff. And then, from my end, to watch the immigration court just completely become politically compromised is a tough thing to watch. I've been litigating cases in immigration court for 13 years, and there is no litigation now in immigration court. Everything has to be done in federal court. And that may be the future of immigration litigation.
Thank you. Wow, that's disturbing for sure. All right, let's move to New York, where Seth Stern is the director of advocacy for the Freedom of the Press Foundation, and we wrote about in journalism some things that were happening that were reported by the newspaper AM New York. So, Seth, if you're available, can you? There you are. Okay, talk about for your 3 minutes about what the relationship of ICE and the press is in the situations that you've encountered and have written about in AM New York.
Sure. Well, right now, and thanks so much for having me, Richard. First time here. I really appreciate it. Right now, I'm physically in New York, and Freedom of the Press Foundation is based in New York, but I actually live in Chicago. I didn't tell you that at the time we scheduled this because it wasn't particularly relevant at the time, but now it's far more relevant. So I'll talk about that a bit. AM New York is a news outlet, obviously, that covers news in New York, and had reported on ICE agents photographing journalists' press credentials in immigration court and otherwise attempting to intimidate and bully reporters who were in common areas of the courtroom where they're allowed to be, attempting to photograph or do routine work that they're entitled to do. It wasn't a matter of arresting them for breaking any courthouse rules or anything like that, just intimidation. And we've seen that practice before of photographing press credentials, mostly at protests. But it's a way to say we know who you are, we're watching you, and tread carefully. We, following that report, organized correspondence both to federal authorities and to the New York mayor's office of it's MoMA, something in entertainment.
Media and entertainment.
Media and entertainment, yeah. And MoMA said, they don't have jurisdiction. The feds, of course, didn't respond. At least we were able to bring some exposure to that issue. But really, that's a small and thanks to some others on the call, including Mickey, who are very much involved in that effort. But that's a small part of what we've been doing at Freedom of the Press Foundation. We've been involved with journalists arrested, assaulted by ICE, whether for reasons relating to their immigration status or for their reporting. So you've got the protests in LA where a whole lot of journalists were assaulted, shot, ended up getting a temporary restraining order against both federal authorities and the LAPD. We've already talked about the Mario Guevara case. There's also the case of Rumisa Öztürk, who is no longer locked up, but deportation proceedings are still in process. She's not a journalist. She wrote an opinion column, but for us, at least, she was exercising her freedom of the press. It doesn't really matter if she was a professional journalist or not. And I'm also aware of other journalists who have been picked up who don't want to go public yet. So we're involved on that side. We're also.
Let me just interrupt for those who aren't familiar with that case. She was a graduate student, or is a graduate student at Tufts University, and she wrote an op-ed about Palestine. And the next thing you know, she was walking down the street, and some agents grabbed her and took her away. Okay, go ahead.
Yep, and she was in jail for I think almost 2 months. Now she's no longer in jail, but the proceedings remain. And Secretary Rubio wrote a memo that essentially acknowledged that the sole basis for the deportation proceedings against this person who was here on a student visa is that she expressed pro-Palestine views in an op-ed. He considers that to be support of terrorism, support of Hamas. So that's where she is. She's not a journalist, but there's nothing about the legal theories being used against her that couldn't also be used against professional journalists, citizen journalists, so on. There's also the matter of ICE attempting to operate very much in secret, which obviously impacts journalists. This notion that they are entitled to put on a mask and make themselves into a secret police force, and that reporting their whereabouts, reporting their locations, identifying them is incitement of violence, is aiding and abetting folks who are looking to not be seen by ICE. We saw Brendan Carr, the chair of the FCC, send a letter to a radio station in California accusing them of operating outside of the public interest for reporting on an ICE operation. They didn't identify anyone. They said that the officers were in such and such area driving such and such vehicles, you know, a Chevy Tahoe or something, nothing, not the license plate numbers. That was enough to draw the ire of the FCC. Pretty routine stuff. CNN reported the existence of an app called ICE Block, which is a tracking app that allows people to track ICE's whereabouts. That's constitutionally protected in and of itself, but merely reporting on the existence of the app was enough to draw threats from the administration. So there is this there's this deep sense of secrecy and this attempt to treat this as a warlike situation, as a terrorism situation where emergency powers can be used to silence dissent and to evade transparency. One case I also want to quickly mention to call attention to, there are two journalists from Cincinnati who were arrested in Kentucky on a protest. The protest was on the bridge, the Roebling Bridge, which goes from Cincinnati to Covington, Kentucky. So their cases in Kentucky. They were arrested at a protest of the detention of Ayman Solomon, who was himself a former journalist. He fled Egypt because he was being persecuted there for his journalism. Came here, didn't work as a journalist here, worked as a hospital chaplain, I believe, and only to have two journalists arrested at a protest over his detainment. One of them is still scheduled to go to trial this week. Apparently, one was offered an extension and took it. The other was offered the same extension and did not take it. So Lucas Griffith, who's a student journalist from University of Cincinnati, scheduled to go to trial this week on the 2nd. The other journalist that trial is postponed till January. So those are, some of the things we're working on. That's on the advocacy side. That's what I do. Our organization also operates the Press Freedom Tracker, which is very busy these days, documenting press freedom violations across the country. They attempt to document them comprehensively, from assaults of journalists, arrests of journalists, subpoenas of journalists, prior restraints, and various other categories of press freedom violations. We operate Secure Drop, which is a tool that many newsrooms use to receive tips confidentially and securely from whistleblowers. We conduct digital security trainings as well. So that's me speaking as from Freedom of the Press Foundation. A couple things I wanted to add to Craig's really spot on remarks, just as a Chicagoan. The national media presence, I think, has been lacking. I think the national media really took the bait when Trump said the National Guard's not coming to Chicago anymore. Never mind. They're going to Memphis instead. That was framed as sort of this big win for the resistance. And everyone said nothing to see here and went home. Meanwhile, ICE has really been invading the city, and they're starting out west in the west suburbs and far west side of the city. One, because there are facilities there, but I think also because there is not a whole lot of media there. There is not, there are a lot of recent immigrants there. There are a lot of poorer communities there, and there are a lot of police and city workers living there. So you've got a combination of communities without a whole lot of media and a whole lot of activism infrastructure, and a demographic that is somewhat sympathetic to ICE. So it's really an easy place for them to operate. Hostility between immigration officers and the press started before this. Immigration courts, like I was talking about in New York with AMNY, I've heard from certain journalists and certain outlets that they pulled their reporters or pulled themselves from going to cover immigration court just because of the level of hostility. Reporters were apparently being asked to check in where no one else was. Remarks were being made. People didn't feel comfortable at immigration courts. Some of the same reporters who had negative interactions, let's say, with immigration authorities in court are the ones covering the protests here. I think additional hostility built up a couple of weeks ago when, as some of you might have read, a man named Silverio Gonzalez was shot and killed in Franklin Park, Illinois, when ICE attempted to stop him. Who knows whether he knew that ICE was attempting to stop him, or whether he thought that the people with guns jumping out of an unmarked van were something other than ICE. We'll never know the answer to that. Anyway, ICE put out an official narrative that he drove that he was dragging an officer and was shot in self-defense. Local journalists poked holes in that narrative. I would say it's pretty safe to say that narrative was false. Started with independent journalists, Sun-Times and others sort of supplemented that initial reporting. But two of the journalists on that reporting team that poked holes in that story were Raven Geary and Steve Held. Raven was shot in the face with a pepper ball the other on Friday. Steve Held had also been shot, had his press credentials snatched off of him, and he ended up being the one who was arrested on Saturday night. Now, there's no obviously direct proof of retaliation. Nobody said they're, impossible to prove, really. But it's a fairly small pool of reporters that are out there. Raven has told me that the same agents who shot and arrested them called them by name. It wasn't as if they didn't know who they were. So, read into that what you will, I suppose. And we also, as we've heard, a CBS journalist was assaulted. Craig talked about that case while in her car, passing by sort of to see if there was news going on. So there have been a number of arrests, well, one arrest, but a number of assaults of journalists, seemingly very targeted. From what I understand, these weren't, highly chaotic situations where anyone was confused about who was who, or where there was a crowd that was, violent, that needed to be dispersed on an emergency basis. I was pleased to see that after Held was arrested Saturday night, I first found out about this from a text from another reporter at, I'm going to say 7:38 at night. By 10 or so, maybe 10 independent news outlets had pulled together to release a joint statement. Really tough to accomplish on a Saturday night. The legacy outlets were not party to that statement. I'm going to assume that was because more layers of approval are needed, not because of any, malice, but it was unfortunate that it was really the independent press sticking up for its own, and none of the, none of the broadcasters, none of the major metro newspapers were involved in that. And then there was also an incident, just speaking of the coverage here, with one of the newspapers referring to Mr. Held as somebody who called himself or identified as a journalist. Now, this is somebody who writes news stories regularly, has a long history as a reporter. It's not, I understand there are scenarios where it's, everyone with an iPhone can say they're a journalist. That's not who Steve Held is. He's a journalist by any definition. Fortunately, that was corrected quickly, but it reflects this sort of divide that I think needs to be bridged between the independent press and the more mainstream outlets that are operating here.
Seth.
Yeah.
What news outlet had to make the correction?
Sun-Times.
Thank you.
I didn't want to call them out, but if you ask me, I will. And I'm a big fan of the Sun-Times. Back when I was practicing law, I did a lot of legal work for them. I assume that it was an editor who wasn't familiar with Steve Held's work, not that it was some malicious thing, but it was unfortunate that happened. So anyway, Held was let out at around 1:30 a.m., a few hours after his arrest. It really took, and this just, I don't know if this is happening elsewhere. Yeah, I forgot to mention that the Chicago Headline Club also released a great statement, I think the following day, and was engaged night of, attempting to figure out how to navigate the situation. I think we are fortunate that there were some lawyers from the firm Lovey and Lovey that happened to go to the protest just to observe. And they were able to sort of kick into gear along with other lawyers from firms in the city that went out once the news broke. He got out at 1:30. So he was only in there for a few hours, but it took forever to even figure out where he was. Like, ICE phone lines were just dead. It wasn't even like they ring and nobody picked up. They were dead phone lines. No one on the scene could give answers to the lawyers and journalists who were attempting to investigate, and just figure out where he was. Whether they needed to post bond or something. It was quite quite a mess. One thing I thought was notable that Mr. Held said on social media after the fact, once ICE realized that he was, well, not that, once they realized they had a journalist locked up who was looking around and observing the conditions of the facility he was in, they attempted to either put a cloth or tape up, his cell so he couldn't see out. He said he was able to still see through the cracks. But, that seemed very telling to me and something worth highlighting that shouldn't just get lost in a social media post that Steve put out on Sunday morning. Another positive, in addition to the Headline Club and local press coming together, the Broadview Police Department. Broadview is the town that Craig was talking about, where ICE's facility is located and where these protests are happening. The Broadway Police Department said it is going to investigate the ICE agents who assaulted the CBS reporter. I don't know if they're also going to investigate the assaults on Raven and Steve, the two independent journalists, or another independent journalist whose name I'm blanking on, who also was shot with pepper balls. I'm not sure why they chose that particular case, but a local police department investigating federal agents, I think, is welcome news, and I commend them for doing that. The Illinois State Police also announced that they are going to offer their assistance to the Broadview investigation. So those are some positives, both the media community and the law enforcement community coming together to address this situation. Hopefully, on the law enforcement side, it's not a political stunt and it actually has teeth. We will see, but I'm going to hope for the best. The last thing I wanted to say about ICE, I had a conversation recently with an incarcerated journalist we work with, incarcerated for reasons having nothing to do with ICE, but he's been reporting on conditions inside Texas prisons for a while, for 20 years. And what he was saying is that, we need to start, even those of us who have not been particularly active on the rights of incarcerated journalists in the past, need to anticipate more journalists are going to be incarcerated. And if we want to know about conditions inside, for example, ICE facilities like those Steve Held observed on Saturday night, transparency inside jails and prisons, particularly immigration detention centers, are going to have universal importance now, not only to the relatively isolated community that incarcerated journalists traditionally serve. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there as a closing thought.
Okay, thanks very much. A lot to chew over there. I wonder if Mickey Osterreicher, who is the General Counsel for the National Press Photographers Association, wants to just briefly add anything to what you've said.
Well, Seth, first of all, thank you for having me. Seth, as he always does, cover this pretty comprehensively. I mean, NPPA has been around since 1946 as the voice of visual journalists. For many years, I've been doing training with journalists. I was a photojournalist in print and broadcast for a little over 40 years and went back to law school towards the end of my career there. And overall, training with journalists, telling them what their rights are is all well and good, and I continue to do it. But I've also found, unfortunately, that a journalist saying, out in the field, I know my rights, is usually the last sentence they utter before hearing, turn around, put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest, if indeed they even get that courtesy, which lately is not happening, just being slammed up against the wall or a car taken down to the ground. So somebody had asked a question before about ICE policy regarding journalism. I posted a link in the chat. Interestingly enough, there's one of the sections there talks about journalistic activity. The problem with that is it's 3 years old and it's a piece of paper. And going back to what I said about training journalists, I have spent probably the last 15 years, not only training journalists, but training police officers, because the only way we're going to ever see accountability, is, at least with respect to the rights of the press, is when officers understand and respect the oath that they swore to uphold the Constitution, of which the last time I looked, the First Amendment was still part of the Bill of Rights. So yeah, I've been doing that training. The other hat that I've worn, as I've been a uniformed reserve sheriff's deputy in Erie County, New York, since 1976. So I understand the challenges of law enforcement, but I understand the fact that they're there to uphold the law, not necessarily feel like they're above the law. And, you know, what we've seen from ICE, unfortunately, has far exceeded almost anything that we've seen from other law enforcement agencies. As Seth mentioned, the LA Press Club and journalists out there have sued both the LAPD and the LASD. They've gotten a TRO against the LAPD, a preliminary injunction against the LASD, against the LAPD and the DHS. But again, the fact that we're seeing these things occur, we're seeing the courts be supportive. Unfortunately, we're also seeing a lot of those decisions getting reversed at the appellate, if not the Supreme Court level, and that's discouraging as well. So we just need to have things in place where this training is ongoing, because without policies in the police, in law enforcement agencies, without training, there can be no accountability. There can be no chance of discipline. Most of the police agencies have very strong unions, and they represent their officers vociferously. And again, if you don't have policies, you don't have training, trying to hold someone accountable for violating those policies, if they're not trained to, or if there are no policies at all, is truly an uphill battle. So, you know, not to monopolize too much of the time, you've got a lot of ground to cover, but, you know, if there's anything that NPPA can do to help any of the journalists here or any of the organizations here, please feel free to reach out to me, and we'll be happy to help.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that very much. I want right here in the room, I see Dave Leventhal, and he is an investigative reporter and author of a piece that was in the Columbia Journalism Review last week with the intriguing title of ICE May Be Breaking the Law to Stonewall Reporters. So I want to ask, first of all, I want to give you the mic and then ask you to explain what you were writing about.
Well, thank you very much for having me. This piece in the Columbia Journalism Review, I spent much of the summer and ultimately interviewed about 24 journalists working at news organizations, large and small, East Coast, West Coast, through the heartland of the country, with the goal of trying to understand whether they were getting anywhere with FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, that they had filed early on this year with not only ICE, but also Customs and Border Protection. And to cut to the chase, effectively none of them had gotten any kind of response that was journalistically actionable. That is to say that any of the records that they had requested, the data that they had sought, had not months and months later been provided to them. And at a very basic level, that is just simply in violation of both the spirit and the letter of the FOIA law. Now, I need not tell anyone in this room that FOIA at its best can be a wildly effective tool for piercing the veil of government secrecy. And many of the journalists that I spoke to said this was, in their opinion, FOIA at its worst, where the law, in essence, the only way for it to be effective for them and for them to obtain the records that they were seeking is that they had to go to court. And for an organization, for example, like Bloomberg, spoke to a reporter there who said, of course, we have the resources to go and fight in court if we choose to do so. Axios, some of the other national news organizations. But I spoke to a reporter who had done wonderful work at a small public radio station in Wyoming, incredibly earnest, doing on-the-ground reporting, doing 3 jobs at once, and she had no ability, at least at this point, to fight her FOIA fight, to understand what was happening when ICE came to town one day and started rounding people up in her community in and around Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Similarly, talked to a reporter at the Denver Post who said, look, I would love to, but we don't necessarily have the resources. I don't have the time. I've got 7 other assignments that I got to work on. It's just going to be too difficult. So this really all speaks, and if you read the story through the experiences of the many reporters that who articulate their situations in the story, they find themselves dealing with a organization in ICE and also Customs and Border Patrol or Border Protection, where it's an impenetrable vault of information that they're trying to either go over or under or through, and it's proving to be incredibly difficult at a time when everything that we've just been hearing about is happening in real time, and really the best that they're looking for down the road is protracted federal court fights in order to get information about what happened back in January or February of March of this year that may not come to fruition in terms of them getting responsive documents and responsive data until sometime in 2026 or beyond, if they ever get it at all. So that is the state of play. A couple of organizations I also spoke to, and then I'll wrap it up and take any questions, but American Oversight is a nonprofit organization that very much specializes in FOIA. They file FOIAs of all sorts across all different government agencies. They have filed, at least as of early September, 137 different FOIA requests with ICE or Customs and Border Protection. Take a guess how many have come back where they have had successfully gotten the information that they sought. Who said 1? Well, you win the prize because it is literally 1. Your prize is that you're going to get your FOIA request denied when you file it. But in the transactional records access clearinghouse at Syracuse University, my alma mater, also too had very similar situation that they described, where they literally do this. That's why they exist in large part, to gather data using FOIA as a tool, and they too have in essence struck out. So it is bleak, but at the same time too, the good news, if there is any to be had, is that journalists are becoming ever more aware of it. It does seem like news organizations too are becoming ever more aware of it. And if they didn't have a plan for using FOIA, and also knowing that they had a full-on fight and go just beyond the FOIA requests, go beyond the appeal, and start thinking, all right, legal, what is our strategy here? That's something that I very much was picking up from many of the reporters, that they're thinking about this in a very different way today. And look, FOIA was bad under Obama. It was worse under Trump 1.0. It got even worse, arguably, under Biden. And now it is functionally useless, quote unquote, as one reporter said to me.
Jeez. Okay. First Terry and then Jesse. Then I have a question for all the panelists and anybody in the room, which is, we've heard pretty gloomy stories here. What can we do about this? All right, now, Terry and then Jesse.
Well, actually, this was is the gentleman who does the training of police still there? I guess not.
No, I'm here.
Okay, here's my question. ICE is apparently hiring 10,000 more agents. Do you have any idea what kind of training they will get?
Unfortunately, from my experience, oftentimes and eventually my camera will warm up and you'll be able to see me a little better. But my experience is, yes, there is a First Amendment. Next slide. But even if they train to their policy that I mentioned and that I sent the link to, it needs to be reinforced constantly. It's not, shouldn't be a one-off. Hey, you're hired. Here's the training, as most of them get in an academy, and then they go off, never to get any more training again. One of the things we've suggested and some departments have adopted is that on any promotional exam, whether it's for sergeant, lieutenant, captain, whatever, that some questions about police press relations and First Amendment knowledge be included.
But isn't that the nature of the beast for the organization? It's under public scrutiny, press scrutiny, to protect itself. I mean, I just detect an amazement that an organization will try to protect itself, try to close ranks. I mean, that's just normal. I mean, the Washington Post is doing that now with its with the issues that people are interested in there. You could have a church organization. I mean, it's just perhaps what I'm saying is that that our outrage may be is misplaced. I beg your pardon? It may be, but in any legal context, there are two sides to it, or at least two sides. It's just that I just wonder whether it can't be another approach, another tactic, another something more. But for an organization to try to protect itself, that's just so natural. That's so
Thank you. Tracy Powell has her hand up on the Zoom.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Powell, the founder of the Pivot Fund. Richard, I want to try to answer the question that you asked about what can we do. I launched the Racial Equity and Journalism Fund at Borealis Philanthropy during right before the racial uprising following George Floyd's murder. We launched a program at that time called the Racial Journalism Legal Defense Fund. And one of the things that we did with that particular fund, with the report, along with the Reporters Committee, is that any journalist working for an independent news outlet, particularly those serving communities of color, could call a lawyer in advance before they go out to cover a protest or rally, and have a lawyer on call just in case anything went down. They can immediately call that lawyer and have that lawyer on, meet them at the courthouse if necessary, meet them at the protest, so that that lawyer can defend them. That program has expanded. Borealis no longer supports it. I think is now being supported by NBC Universal. But it has expanded because a lot of other organizations have taken up that model, and now they provide support for journalists, especially independent journalists. And we've heard this tension between, I don't use the term mainstream, I use the term traditional. We've heard this tension about traditional newsrooms versus independent. I want to get to that later, but now what I want to talk about kind of like how funders are responding right now, and I hope that is an appropriate time to do that. So funders are thinking about security and safety right now, and we're also thinking about rapid response. Earlier this year, the Pivot Fund did a back-to-back webinar trainings for journalists about how to prepare for what we knew what was coming. We gave security trainings, both for online safety, but also in-person safety. I am now saying to funders, it's beyond time for the virtual trainings. We are past that now. And so one of the things that, Pivot Fund has unfortunately had to do is provide security and safety. We recently, I have to be very careful about how I talk right now because I don't want to put journalists in danger, particularly independent journalists. But we have had to offer independent journalists security, meaning we've had to give them money or connect them to resources so that they can hire their own security. Independent journalists don't belong to these big news conglomerates. And so they don't have a deep bench. They don't have a whole lot of money. And so that's why funders are now stepping up and providing resources, providing dollars for independent journalists to hire their own in-person security. We've had to respond in terms of cybersecurity. People's websites have been hacked. We've seen among our own grantee pool, ICE threaten our journalists. We had one journalist, I won't say where that journalist was, but they were covering a raid. They were at a safe distance. They were, right next to another reporter for Univision. And an agent came up videoing them and recording their faces and taking pictures of them. And when they questioned this agent, he lifted his t-shirt and brandished a gun. And so in that instance, that journalist was able to call us and we were able to connect them to security. We're looking at not only journalists whose newsrooms are comprised of mixed status newsrooms, but their own families are of mixed status. And so we've had journalists who are being surveilled by ICE and the state patrols. And we've had to provide security around that. We've had to provide event security. And a lot of the events have actually had to be curtailed because of the amount of fear out in the communities right now. The other thing funders are doing is now we have pools of rapid response dollars. And so when something is happening, I'll give an example. When we learned about Mario arrest and detainment, we were prepared to use, Pivot Fund was prepared to use rapid response dollars to get him out of jail because we thought as long as he was in DeKalb County jails, we had a chance of getting him out. But as Giovanni explained, Gwinnett County stepped in with some weird stuff, and then there was a hold, and we weren't able to get them. But those rapid response dollars can be used for security, can be used for bailing someone out. And I think that's kind of where we're, not just Pivot Fund, but other funders, we're helping to raise awareness. That's where dollars are needed to go right now. And so those are that's how the funding community is having to respond in this moment. And we need to see more of it.
Thank you, Tracy. That's enlightening, I tell you. Now, Sheila Solomon had her hand up earlier. I wonder if she still has the same question.
Oh, well, thanks, Richard. I actually put something in the chat, hoping Seth might see it while he was speaking, because late this afternoon, it was announced by the governor that 100 military troops are being sent here to protect ICE.
That's in Chicago.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that's in Chicago. I'm in Chicago. Forgot to address that.
Okay. I gather you're not happy about that.
No, I'm not happy about what happened yesterday on the Mag Mile.
Okay. Anyone? McNally, you've been pretty active in the chat room. For those of us who can't see the chat all the time, what were some of your points that you were making? McNally Torres.
Oh, hi guys. Great discussion. The point
tell us who you are first, and then we can go on.
Yeah, I'm a longtime journalist based here in South Florida, and I had my really tense experience dealing with ICE in the past, working on a story. I don't cover immigration per se, but I'm an investigative reporter, and I was working on a story relating to Puerto Rico and Florida. And I will tell you that I had never experienced such on professional people as the ICE public relations folks who, scream at you and are belligerent to you and treat you like you're a criminal. It's just very disturbing. My experience was super disturbing, and this man is a former journalist, which is making more disturbing. But my comment on the chat is that we are facing a lot of issues across the nation, a lot of violations to rights to work as journalists and cover these issues. And now, our media ecosystem is stratified, and we need to join forces. We need to stop this silly, arrogance from the legacy media looking down at independent journalists or independent outlets, and we need to start looking at how we are going to strategize and join forces beyond the silly, press release that, what is that does? Okay, yeah, you send the message, I get it. But beyond that, do you think that they care? They don't care. I mean, this man who I had the disgrace to deal with him years ago, he called me, he screamed at me on the phone. He didn't want me to go to this detention center to go to a hearing. And that's another thing that is happening, I suspect is happening beyond Florida, is that you don't have anymore the traditional immigration court. Yes, the building is there, they have hearings, but they also have these detention centers that sometimes are owned by private companies like we have here in Florida. And they have their mini courtrooms inside. So there's a lot of things going on in there. And if you are not aware of, the public doesn't know, and we reporters doesn't know. And, that's how I had this huge interaction and collision with this guy, because I needed to go and cover this, and I ended up doing it. And I tried to go through the back door because I knew that he didn't want me to go to cover this. So, and it didn't work. So I had to call him. But anyway, to make a long story short, I did the story, and to me, that's the success. That's the best revenge. You get the story done, and you show them that we are gonna do whatever it takes, legally to do our jobs, because the public is waiting for us to do our jobs and cover our communities. But we need to stop this competition, arrogance, because we have too much at stake. There's too much going on. And, a lot of us are powerless in a way, in that sense, right? It's the government.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Hey,
Now, I
Richard.
see Zita Rocha has mentioned she mentioned unity in journalism organizations, saying they need to get together. I haven't heard anything about any of this from any of the journalism organizations that I write about. You want to expand on that, Zita?
Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm also a longtime journalist and was ED for NHJ twice, actually, once interim and once permanent back in the 90s. But yeah, what has really surprised me is the lack of any kind of communication or joint statement on the part of all the journalism organizations, and I'm including in this NABJ, NHJ, AAJA, SPJ, independent, and I mean, the whole shebang. I mean, someone needs to gather the organizations and come up with some kind of statement, and jointly, I would think, seek some funding to establish some way to protect journalists, independent journalists and non-independent journalists. Unity did its work. It was very effective on many, many levels in terms of raising the profile with mainstream media about the need for diversity in newsrooms. But we're at a different level now. This is a different game. We are talking about, as you all know, basic challenges to the right of the free press to do its job in this country. And so I think we need to make an urgent call to everyone. I'm amazed too, Richard, that the biggies, right? The New York Times, the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post have not somehow come together to address this as a group. And as you know, there's more strength in numbers, and I've seen none of that happen. And I'm frankly mystified and don't quite understand it. I don't know if someone else might have some thoughts on why we haven't seen our organizations come up and stand up and do what's right, for what we're going through at this point in time.
Richard?
Yeah, who is that? I can't
Rebecca.
see who is.
Rebecca Aguilar.
Oh, Rebecca. Okay, I don't see. There you go.
Hi.
Hello, Rebecca.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca Aguilar. I am a former national president of SPJ, also former VP of NHJ, and I'm the founder of #Calling All Journalists initiative, where we help journalists survive and thrive. Zita, I wanted to answer your concern. I think many board members, just from my experience, many board members, even presidents, work for companies where they can't speak. I mean, and I've talked to some of them, current board members, former board members of all these organizations. I remember when I was the president of SPJ, being an independent journalist, I could say what I wanted and not feel like I was going to get fired or burned or whatever. But fellow journalists who are also the leaders of other organizations, they had little walls that they had to deal with. I mean, what if the boss gets mad? I have to, run it by them. They're not independent. They still work for somebody that gives them a paycheck. So that could be one of the reasons that they're concerned of their own livelihood. And that also involves other board members. Not that they don't want to speak out, because they do, but because they work for these corporations, they really can't. I think that bringing everybody together, I think that's a good idea, but I think that when you have organizations from all angles getting at them and bringing out a statement, that's more powerful. I applaud the Chicago Headline Club, probably the strongest SPJ chapter in the country, because they tend to do things independently. They don't wait for National to say anything, which National I don't think has said anything yet. I may be wrong. But I applaud that chapter because they really have the back of journalists in Chicago. And real quick, when it concerns immigration, by the way, everybody, I'm in Dallas where we had the shooting last week. I've been treated like McNally. I have been in front of that facility where those people were shot and have had immigration people while I'm on the sidewalk say, you need to leave. But I'm fortunate that in the past, when I worked for the Fox station here in Dallas, I was able to speed dial the lawyers in New York straight to them and say, hey, can you talk to them? And they jumped in. Now that I'm an independent journalist, I do have an attorney that also I can dial and say, you want to talk to these feds? But what I try to do is, I've never really had anybody yell at me. Maybe it's because I've been here since '94 and they kind of know me. But what I do try to do is build a bridge with, I know many former ICE agents who live here, former FBI agents who I talk with. And they also say on the inside, a lot of those people are feeling the stress and the pressure, right? We got to do, they see that some of them can be the thug mentality. Not that they like it. I'm not here to defend ICE or FBI. I am the daughter of former undocumented workers, so it hurts when I see what I see. But I do understand that there are people on the inside that they're getting a paycheck and they don't like the crap that's going on. And sometimes I don't want to say use, but I do take advantage of the relationship I have with these former officers to find out what's going on the inside. Last week, I didn't hear of any local reporters or photographers being manhandled by the feds. In fact, they set up press conferences. It was pouring rain. They've had press conference. The only thing that there was a little bit of concern was that the FBI was talking more about the ICE agents and their safety over the immigrants who were shackled and had handcuffs and couldn't run. They didn't want to speak about that. But that's the situation here in Dallas, and I hope, Zita, that you understand why some of these organizations don't speak out. Yes, some journalists work in fear, and I totally understand because they still have, families and need to make a paycheck.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, and I agree. You know, it is a fine line, and you are beholden to your employer to a certain extent. I guess my point was that there's always strength in numbers, and we have organizations like the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. There are press clubs all over the country. There's even a New Mexico press club that I just came across. I live in New Mexico, close to the border. But what I'm saying is that in unity, in unity, there is power, rather than us all coming at this from our individual. Yes, you may be president of NABJ or NAHJ, but if under an umbrella organization that includes all of these other organizations, you come together, there is protection in that in some sense, and then how much you want to say personally because of your employment, that's really an individual thing, like you said. And I totally understand it. But that was the whole point of unity, when we all came together to really rally for the kind of diversity that didn't exist, and to create it's better as I think I believe it's better now, much better. But my point is that there is strength in numbers, and an umbrella organization coming together with all of these others joining in, I think could be an effective voice for the protection of journalists. Because I only see this getting worse, frankly, and what you all have described, Tracy and all, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. Yeah.
Well,
So,
Tracy,
Richard.
yes.
Who's Richard?
Who's speaking?
Sorry, Diana Fuentes with IRE.
Oh, very good. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. I was going to say also that unfortunately, what's happening also, Sita, is that there's so much going on right now on our industry. Just recently, IRE joined with a groups on several different issues. We signed on to a statement, for example, demanding the release of Mario Guevara.
Right.
We signed on to protesting the Pentagon, trying to do this ridiculous statement, the requirement for reporters to sign the pledge, limiting their ability to report without government approval. Again, the strength in numbers is accurate. That's very true. And we know that it works. But it does take a little while to get the groups together. And so we try to move, but it does take a little while for everybody to get together. What's happening in Chicago is obviously, it's just awful and terrible. And I think that you will see something happening with more groups. And it is just a matter of getting everybody together and trying to get us to move, because there's not a giant, it's just so much is happening against all of us. We just recently signed on to the group with reporters. This one started with the Reporters Without Borders on this whole thing that the Department of Homeland Security is trying to do the visa restrictions, for the international journalists, which of course could have repercussions for the U.S. journalists abroad.
Yeah, please explain that for people who don't know.
Oh, that one, yes. Well, what we've got is the DHS is proposing the system that would restrict journalists. Journalists would be restricted to 90 days, Chinese nationals, and citizens from other countries would be restricted to 240 days here. And they would have to be reporting every so often to the DHS, saying, what are they doing here? Why are they here? Instead of just being here for the time that they need to be to complete their stories, which, as we all know, if you're doing an investigative piece or you're reporting in the United States, your story could take a little while, it could take a long time. But imposing this kind of restrictions on international journalists here could, in fact, force other countries to do the same thing to our reporters abroad. How do you do independent journalists and expect people to do what they can, having the government's over your shoulder? It's just madness. And so we, along with, it's a whole bunch of groups joined with Reporters Without Borders. We joined a whole bunch of people calling for this. but it took a little while for everybody to come to be on board to sign up with it. But there were 17 of these organizations that joined, and IRE was happy to join them. But it did take a little while to get everybody together. But it's just denouncing these restrictions, and we're calling on them to do that. But it was let me see, I was trying to get a list of everybody. It was the Committee to Protect Journalists, the Media and Democracy, NPPA, who's been here tonight, RTDNA, even the healthcare journalists joined, the SPJ, of course, was part of this. First Amendment Coalition are among some of the groups, the Free Press, and there's a bunch of organizations, but it's just, sorry, I know we have a lot to talk about, so I don't want to.
We do.
Yeah.
We have some. We do have some other. Yeah. Who's Jube
Shiver.
Seth, yeah. Oh, Jube, go ahead.
I have a question maybe some of the lawyers in your audience can answer. I just wonder why the legal community writ large seems to be a lot less proactive during this Trump administration than the last one. The first one, lawyers were at Dulles airports and other international airports assisting travelers and overlooking immigration and customs to make sure that they were following the law. And I'll give you another example. I was talking to a friend of mine, Gwen Wilcox, who used to be head of the National Labor Relations Board. And I told one of her friends, I mean, why don't you just lock the doors instead of having these Elon Musk people sort of go through your office and look at your files. You need to put them on the onus to make them demonstrate that they have the authority to do that, rather than just welcoming them and make sure that they're following the law. And this administration, that doesn't seem to be happening. We're always on the defensive, going to court to try to protect the right rather than defending the rights that we already have. And I think one of the earlier speakers pointed out that at this point, we're so far behind the 8 ball that may be a losing cause. But I just wondered what some of the lawyers in the audience thought about that.
Okay, what lawyer wants to talk about that? Respond.
I'm a lawyer. I can talk about it to some extent. I think some of it has to do with the intimidation we saw earlier in the administration, where certain law firms were hit with executive orders barring their attorneys from access to government buildings, government employees, and so on. Some of the organizations or some of the law firms caved. Others did not. Others fought back, and the ones that fought back won. And we joined a brief that the Intercept organized, which I think had like 62 signatures, news outlets, press freedom organizations, individual media and First Amendment attorneys, explaining from a press perspective specifically how much access to counsel means, access to pro bono counsel specifically, and how targeting of these law firms and having their choice of who to represent scrutinized by the administration was a threat to those rights. And those briefs were cited in the opinions shooting down those executive orders. So despite that those executive orders clearly didn't hold up constitutionally in court, they're still out there sort of in the, they're known, they happened, and they continue to intimidate, even if they were ultimately ineffective, because they signal that executive order or not, this administration is going to be hostile to attorneys that take cases that this administration doesn't like. So I think that's part of it. I think another part of it, as you sort of alluded to in your question, is that there's just too much going on. There are a lot of lawyers in this country, but not enough to deal with this much illegality. So, it's the same as you can talk about all the stories that go uncovered. Some of it is because media outlets are intimidated and self-censoring. Some of it is just because there aren't enough journalists to cover all of them.
So,
And I think
Seth,
that
I want to add something to this, because it's not. I agree with you to a certain extent, but I don't think. Let me start it this way. I'm not a lawyer. I have a law degree, but I'm not a lawyer. What we're seeing now from the administration, and again, I have to be careful because I have a 501c3 too, but What we're seeing now is a very organized effort. Before in Trump 1.0, the institutions, even though they were under tremendous stress, were still holding. We had people at the table who were holding these kind of extremists back from what they really wanted to do. There was a rule of law. Now you have agencies that no longer believe in the rule of law. So for example, with Mario's arrest, Mario is here legally. He has a work permit. He is essentially a journalist in jail with no charges against him right now.
Yep.
Under the rule of law, he is supposed to be free. He's supposed to be walking around right now, but he's not because there's no rule of law. And that is what has broken down.
Oh,
That
yeah.
is what, I mean, you have lawyers who want to play by the rules, but they can't because you have an administration not playing by the rules. And I think that's why I think there are lawyers out there working to answer the question, but they cannot keep up with the level of corruption that we're now currently facing.
Oh,
All
yeah,
right.
I agree. And
Well,
I hope I
okay.
didn't say anything inconsistent with that. I couldn't agree more. There's only so much utility to the law at the moment. I mean, Guevara has plenty of lawyers, but there are a lot of cases that in past years, lawyers would have been all over. For example, immigration courts are no longer requiring government attorneys in some instances to identify themselves on the record. So in addition to masked agents, you've got unidentified prosecutors on these cases. That should be a really big deal, but the legal services organizations just don't have time for it until it is sufficiently widespread to rise up to that level of priority, because there's just so much else going on. And same thing goes, as Diana was saying, there are all of these collaborative letters, collaborative statements between news organizations, between press freedom organizations. Many of the ones Diana mentioned are facilitated by a working group that Freedom of the Press Foundation operates, that any of you who have ideas about collaboration are welcome to speak at. Just email me, seth@freedom.press. We'll get you on the agenda for one of these meetings, talk about how we can collaborate. But us putting out the statements is ineffective if nobody covers the statements we put out. And I get it. There's other news to write about other than 26 news organizations condemned X and Y, and 31, press freedom advocates said to do, there's other news to put out besides our press releases about the coalition statements that we release. So it's just not getting attention. It is happening. It's just how do we get it to break through to the news cycle is really the question, I think.
Okay, thank you. We have about 7 minutes left. Ray Suarez was delayed in getting here, but he's here now, and we're all the better for it. Do you want to have any observations you want to make, or especially from your? Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
If you need to get to your nation's capital from New York, find another way besides Amtrak. It's my first recommendation. We are now we're seeing writ large in these various ways the problem. But the fundamental, it starts from the fundamental that this government does not believe that it has any responsibility to talk to the press. It does not believe it has any responsibility to be transparent or accountable. So if they can fob you off with a lie, there's very little second thought about that. They'll lie to you, and then once you go to print or go to air, they'll say that you covered the story incorrectly or didn't have the right facts. They understand that newsrooms have been denuded and decimated and emptied out, so that a lot of people are working on daily deadlines or every other daily deadlines, and if they just don't call you back, you'll go to air or to print without them. That, no matter what we were covering, that would be a major impediment. So there are journalists covering other things besides immigration that are running up against that too, because this government does not believe it has any responsibility to tell the public about what it's up to and how it does what it does. So when we start from there, recently I was at the border. They do certain things overtly and are very happy to show you their gizmos and the tremendous things they've built on the border and the steel curtain walls and the concrete barriers. They're very big on that. But when you ask them about numbers and locations and how people are being processed and where they go and how many are in detention, they don't want to tell you, so they don't tell you. And they tell you somebody else who can tell you, who you then call 1,000,000 times, who never calls you back. And then you have to, at some point, you have to cut bait and move on without them. They know that. This is not a secret to them, that they are dealing with a business that's on the back foot, dealing with reporters who have maybe 3 or 4 different things that they're working on at any given time, so they can delay as a way of just slowing the gears of this whole thing. If you want to find out where someone taken into detention is in the system, you can't, because they don't feel that they have to tell you. Add to that the existence of an atomized business that's been broken up into 10,000 little pieces. And when you see these crazy collars where masked guys are throwing people on the floor, there's a cluster of people around them with phones in their hands, taking their picture. Some of them are reporters. Some of them are not reporters. Some of them say they're reporters because they're going to try to sell this thing that they're taking a picture of to somebody, because news organizations actually can't send people out into the field to wait for something to happen anymore, because you're covering a city the size of Houston or Chicago with 3 crews on the street. And it's only a matter of time till somebody gets really, really hurt, because they are pushing people, they're hitting people, they're knocking them over, they're throwing them down, and there's going to be legit people who are trying to cover the news who are going to get hurt. And again, in a world of impunity and no accountability, serious stuff is going to go down. So, I mean, the biggest threat to the understood social order of the United States is that we now have a federal government that doesn't feel that it has to tell the truth about its operations to the people of the country. And when you start from there, everything else that follows, whether you're covering the FAA or the FDA or you're covering the Park Service, anything, it has become so much harder to find anything out. You spin your wheels for hours trying to get a PIO to actually let you talk to the person who knows the answers to the questions that you have. And that's a kind of baseline problem that it's really hard to get around. In the case of immigration, we're dealing with life and death. We're dealing with people that they're sending to Libya, which has been mired in civil war and disorder for the last 15 years. We're sending people that we're picking up who are working in restaurants and food processing plants in major American cities, and we're talking about sending them to Libya and the Congo and Rwanda and all kinds of places on the planet where weak regimes that want something out of the Trump administration are willing to agree to whatever terms the United States government sets. It's a, if you ask a journalist when the most recent bad time was, their answer is always right now, because things have been on a pretty bad trajectory for a while. But now it's like really right now. And it feels sometimes like these statements are hyperbolic and exaggerated, but they're not. This is the really, really bad time now. And when you have a business that is trying to rebuild the plane at 35,000 feet over the country somewhere, and we don't have the kind of heft, the kind of understood respect, because the well has been poisoned for half the country that doesn't believe the things we say. Here we are working as hard as we work to try to find out the truth, to try to be accurate, to try to know whether it's 10 instead of 6 or 6 instead of 2. And half the country thinks that we make things up. I've had conversations with people who believe that we make things up. And I said to them, look, you know, I traveled 100,000 miles last year. It would have been so much easier and a lot less wear and tear on this sexagenarian body to just stay home and make things up. I'm a very creative guy. I could have done that. But they believe that, and once you lose them, once you lose that faith that we are actually beating our brains out trying to do a good job for them, you've lost something very important. But we now are dealing also with a government that knows that it's successfully poisoned the well in this way. And I don't know how we get out of this vicious cycle, but we're in trouble. And you got it. And read my book.
Okay. All right, we've reached the magic hour. Carice had one. Okay.
We're out of time. It's okay.
Wow. Wow. And I see Roger Witherspoon has his hand raised. Roger, could you put your question or comment in the chat room? Because we really are out of time.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, I want to thank everybody for being here in person and also on the Zoom. Those of us who cannot access the chat room because we're here in this room can do so after I print out all the comments and send them to everybody for whom we have email addresses, who is in the room or on the Zoom, and they'll be provocative. And of course, we'll write this up and share Sharon's wonderful pictures that are about to. Yeah, there's probably still some food outside too. And once again, we want to thank Ivan and Dean Whitaker for their hospitality, and we hope that we'll be invited back again. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you again next month.
5 hours and 40 minutes.
Oh my God.
To get from New York.
I hope you were in a good way. You're probably good. All right, I got to learn how to turn this thing off. Oh, thank you.